Hello, and welcome to the New Quantum Era, the podcast where we explore the minds and technologies shaping the future of quantum computing. I'm your host, Sebastian Hassinger. Today, we're going to be delving into one of the exciting and rapidly progressing modalities of quantum computing, neutral atom arrays. These, like trapped ion devices, use individual atoms as qubits, which confers certain advantages over sort of fabricated qubits, like superconducting qubits. And over the past decade, neutral atoms, and they'll often be called Rydberg atom arrays, have moved from an experimental technology built to experiment with new forms of matter, like Bose-Einstein condensates, into one of the leading modalities of qubits. With incredible demonstrations of even up to like 1,000 qubit arrays and logical qubit architectures. So to help us understand this technology, I have the pleasure of speaking with Professor Mark Saffman. Mark is a pioneer in the field of atomic physics and quantum information. He's a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and also serves as chief scientist at Infleqtion, one of the early commercial ventures in neutral atom quantum technology. Over the years, Mark's work has been instrumental in both the theoretical underpinnings and the experimental realization of neutral atom quantum gates, scalable platforms, and advances in quantum error correction. In our conversation, we'll trace Mark's unique career path from industry to academia, discuss how early ideas about cold atom physics turned into powerful neutral atom platforms deployed today, and examine the challenges and breakthroughs that are enabling even larger and more robust quantum processors. We'll also get his perspective on the cross-pollination between university research and commercial product development, and look ahead to the biggest technological hurdles and opportunities on the horizon. So let's jump into my conversation with Professor Mark Saffman. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you. Good to be here, Sebastian.
So you have been, I've been really looking forward to this conversation because you've been sort of instrumental in the development of the Rydberg atom array or the neutral atom array as a modality. Were you involved sort of in the sort of pre-quantum computing applications of those platforms in Bose-Einstein condensate sort of applications?
I was not, and for a professional university professor doing atomic physics, I've had a somewhat atypical career path in that I did my undergraduate work, and then I went to industry for 10 years, and then got bored with that, and then I got my PhD, and then went to a national lab, and then started as a professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison in the late 90s. So spent a lot of time in industry, which was very valuable.
Yeah.
And never did a postdoc, and then got to the university, but I had not published any. I'd thought about atomic physics and doing interesting things with atoms and light and laser cooling of atoms, but I had not published a paper using atoms or cold atoms before I got to the university.
And that, what year was that?
So I got to Madison in 1999. I started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the paper that I remember you've sort of got the highest citations on is the quantum information with Rydberg atoms, right? That was 2010?
Yeah, that was a review paper with Thad Walker and Klaus Mulmer. But so just to tell you, so 1999, I was a new faculty, even though I was a little bit older perhaps than most new faculty. And I had some ideas that got me the job, and I had a startup, and I got a little bit of funding. But my ideas were sort of something that no one else was working on. I thought it was cool, and actually, but I couldn't get traction from the funding agencies to really build up my group. And actually, those ideas later have been demonstrated by other people. But anyway, that's a different story. But then I read this paper about the Rydberg gate from Peter Zoller and Sirac and Lukin and a few other people. I was like, oh, wow, that looks interesting. Why don't I try and do that?
Huh.
just a brash young faculty. And
Sure.
10 years later, we had the first CNOT gate.
Right.
So that was just a lot of fun. And when we started, there was no thought in my mind of, we're going to build a quantum computer.
Right.
It was, this is an interesting physics experiment.
Right.
It's challenging. It's got potential impact. No one else is doing it. Let's try and do that.
Excellent. And so even to the point of coming up with the implementation of a CNOT gate, you were still not really thinking about quantum computing?
Well, I mean, this was 1999, and if
Right.
you look back at quantum computing, there's sort of these five major modalities today. There's a few other approaches, but there's the five primary ones. And the ideas for how you do gates and entanglement and build up circuits for those modalities all appeared basically in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And maybe, I think by the year 2000,
Right.
the ideas were all there, including neutral atoms. There were a few different ideas in 98, 99 for the neutral atoms. But then this Rydberg gate paper really, this looked very powerful. And I had not worked with Rydberg atoms. I knew what Rydberg atoms were. But I mean, it just wasn't, yes, I knew it was for quantum computing, but it wasn't like, I really want to build a quantum computer and do circuits.
I understand. I mean, in the late 90s, that was, it seems still pretty
far
far
away.
off.
Yeah,
it still is, so.
Well, it still is, but it's also a very different world now.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, more recently, obviously, you mentioned Lukin and Vuletich's result of sort of the 48 logical qubits. That's kind of astounding.
It's fantastic, beautiful work. And so this neutral atom platform, we started in writing proposals and getting funding in 01, 02. It was a very small activity for quite a few years. We were doing it, a group in Paris, Granchet and Broes, Dave Weiss, Bill Phillips and Trey Porto. It was really quite a small activity. And we had a gate in 2010. The French did also, had entanglement. And fidelities were not great and so on. It sort of was still a small area. And really there was a big sea change in 2016 where three different groups, the Korean group, Jae-Wook Han, Lukin group, along with Vuletich and Greiner, and Broes in Paris, all independently introduced this atom rearrangement ideas.
Right.
And it was most effectively done in the work at Harvard and in Paris. And that really changed the situation. That was one thing, which sort of enabled us to not have these sparsely populated arrays of single atoms, but have a fully occupied array, which was a useful platform for then doing quantum circuits and so on. And the other thing was there was a big jump in the fidelity of the entangling operations. And I'd say, interestingly, what contributed to that, in my mind, was really two aspects. One, people developed better protocols. Our demonstration in 2010 was the original year 2000 paper, a certain laser pulse sequence, which works, but is not ideal. And people came up with better ideas for how to optimize the protocols and make them less sensitive to technical errors. Plus, there was a understanding emerged of the importance of reducing laser noise that we hadn't fully appreciated earlier. And so the combination of that and making the lasers better, plus these new gate protocols combined to give us much higher fidelities. And now a number of groups with different atoms have very high gate fidelities, 2.5 nines, getting close to 3 nines.
Right. And the laser noise, is that a matter of working with vendors on the actual construction or design of the lasers, or is that using the laser on the table and having mechanisms to reduce noise after the production of the light, essentially?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. It's we work with vendors, but really making these very quiet lasers is mainly done by the academic or now the commercial groups by doing better stabilization of the lasers. But it was also moving from diode lasers, which are very convenient, relatively inexpensive, to more expensive laser types that intrinsically are lower noise.
I see. Interesting. And do you think, so the neutral atom platforms still are used for Bose-Einstein condensates. do you think that work is sort of independent entirely of the computation, or did it help with the working knowledge of the platform and how to do things like address the noise or that sort of thing?
Science and technology evolve, and
Yes.
that the advances one year are then used the next year, and so on. And so, for example, if you look at trapped ion quantum computing, and trapped ions were the first modality that demonstrated a quantum gate. Sir Axeler showed how to, entangle and do a gate with trapped ions, and 1 year later, the Wineland group demonstrated it.
Yeah.
How could they go so fast? Because they'd been working on trapped ion control for 20 years.
Right.
So they were positioned. So the work we're doing with atom arrays and Rydberg atoms and qubits, builds on our understanding
Right.
and techniques that include Bose-Einstein condensates, but we don't directly use Bose condensates in this work.
Right. Yeah. So it's working knowledge or institutional knowledge as a whole.
There's a toolbox of techniques, and there's also a toolbox of technology and equipment that's also developed tremendously. I mean, our latest experiments with prototype neutral atom quantum computers have up to 15 different laser systems. And, I think 30 years ago, you just couldn't imagine operating those experiments.
Right.
It just wouldn't be reliable. But we do it now more or less routinely, although lasers are still one of the headaches.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned trapped ions. Were there techniques or learnings from trapped ions that were leveraged by the neutral atom platform?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
So some of the cooling techniques can be transferred to neutral atoms and have been Raman sideband cooling, for example. Measurement techniques, the actual gates work in a different way, and the details of how we trap individual atoms or ions are different. But there's a lot of overlap, and I'd say atoms and ions are closer to each other, of course, than the other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And each modality has sort of intrinsic limitations of scale. Do you think that it'll be literally the numbers of lasers that you can manage that'll limit neutral atoms?
No, I don't. So scalability is very important because we are in an era where it's no longer a question, well, is this stuff real? Can you make qubits work? Can you perform gates? Absolutely. This is all working as we expected based on our physics understanding. But how do you scale up both the number of qubits, the size of the systems, but also the quality of the operation so you get meaningful computational results out? And one of the exciting things about the neutral atom platform is that this is perhaps the most scalable platform that exists. And with relatively, compared to other approaches, relatively little investment and still relatively small community working on it, there's been just incredible progress in the last 5 years. So there's now multiple groups that have demonstrated arrays with thousands of atomic qubits. And
there's a lot of space in that vacuum.
There's a lot of space in that vacuum. We can
atoms are really small.
Well, we can put 100,000 atomic qubits in an area the size of one transmon.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of ratio.
Yeah.
And there's no reason, in principle, why you couldn't put millions of atoms in one small vacuum cell that would fit in the palm of your hand. You need more laser power. There's ways of reducing the power requirements, of reusing light. But there's also some technology requirements that are still waiting to be developed, I would say. And so one of the ones I would highlight is that this atomic approach to qubits and quantum computing relies on optics for control. Our wiring is not electronic printed circuits, it's laser beams propagating in space. And that's great because it's reconfigurable in real time.
Right.
That gives a great deal of flexibility that's very powerful. But it also means we rely on technology that can rapidly reconfigure optical patterns in space. And there's technology today that's very fast but can't give you enough spatial degrees of freedom. And there's technology that's slow but has many spatial degrees of freedom. We want many spatial degrees of freedom and very fast. Doesn't really exist. People are working on different approaches to that. but we don't have that technology
But it
yet.
feels like a solvable problem.
I believe it is
Yeah.
a solvable problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would that mean faster gate operations, like sort of across the system?
Yeah, so interestingly, our gates are already very fast. So the latest high fidelity entangling gates are a couple hundred nanoseconds. So they're fast.
Yeah.
Our slow point is the measurement time.
I see. Right.
And so there's also efforts underway to make the measurements much faster. But right now, the measurements are a couple orders of magnitude
Right.
Or more slower than the gates.
Right, right, and also preparing. I think like configuring the array and sort of preparing the starting state is relatively slow.
It's relatively slow. I mean, any machine has a boot up time when
Yeah.
you turn on your PC. It takes takes a little while.
Do you
to
get a
boot
progress
up.
bar in the neutral atom array?
Well, we could get there. Sure. There's that. There's measurement. There's also, atoms make fantastic qubits. These are
Yes.
nature's qubits. They're
Yeah.
all identical. They have excellent coherence. They're very well described in our theories. We understand them in great detail. And then they do have some sort of annoying features or defects, which is they don't stick around forever. We have atom loss.
Right.
That's not a showstopper, but it's going to require some extra engineering overhead to deal with that. And people are starting to demonstrate this real-time replacement
Pumping,
of atom
yeah,
loss
yeah,
and
yeah.
continuous operation of arrays and so on. So it's sort of more engineering in a sense,
Yeah.
but it has to be done, and it's challenging, but it will be done.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, as you said, the demonstrations. I think I can't remember the name of but it was. I think it was Caltech had something like 6,000.
That's right. Yeah, the Endres group at Caltech
Endres,
has
yeah.
more than 6,000.
Which is incredible.
There's 2,000 atom array from China at Infleqtion. We showed a 1,600.
Right,
I just
that's
heard some
right.
talks from Harvard this week, and they have more than 3,000 continuously reloaded. So there's lots of progress.
Amazing. I mean, that one demonstration of logical qubits that was published was 280, I think, atoms
Right.
for 48 logical qubits. So you can. It's a pretty good ratio to start with. If you crank up the number of atoms in the array, you're talking about a large number of logical qubits.
That's right. And maybe I'll just make a pitch here for people
Please.
to be a little more specific when they talk about logical qubits.
Yeah.
Because your logical qubit may not be the same as mine.
Yeah.
And you really need to describe logical qubits by what their logical error rate is and how deep a circuit
Yeah.
you can actually use them in. And so these small logical qubits, each of which is based on just a handful of physical qubits, don't have the kind of performance that we're ultimately going to need for running deep circuits.
Is that sort of summed up in the D in the value of D in your mind, or is it more than that?
It's more than that. So there's NKD, if you're
Okay.
familiar with that. So one describes a logical qubit with three numbers. N, the number of physical qubits.
Right.
K, the number of logical qubits that are being encoded. And D, the code distance,
Right.
which you can think of as the number of errors that can be tolerated
Right.
and corrected.
Right.
And so one cares about D, that we can correct more errors and therefore have a lower logical error rate. But one also cares about the ratio of N over K,
Yeah.
or maybe it's K over N,
Yeah,
the code
yeah.
rate. What's the overhead of
Overhead,
physical qubits to encode a number of logical qubits?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I mean that 48 to 280, I think is sort of an industry leading K over N.
That's right, but they were mainly error detecting, not
Yes,
correcting
that's
qubits.
true.
They also did some error
That's
correction.
true. That's the other element of being precise about what you mean when you say logical qubits. It's like syndrome detection, and then syndrome correction is pretty important too.
So, I would say, sort of parallel this very nice work from Google, where they actually
Right.
showed they could increase the code distance and had, I forget what distance they got to.
I think they did D7. I think
D7.
yeah, I think so.
Is also very
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, that was, I think, the sort of underappreciated, at least in a more general audience, aspect of the Google announcement in December was that it as they increased the D, they got longer effective computational times.
Right.
It really worked,
Yeah.
like
So,
as advertised.
these things are highly technical. There's a lot of details which can get lost to an outsider.
Of course.
The bottom line is there is tremendous progress
Yeah.
across
Yeah.
a number of platforms.
Yeah. And at Infleqtion, you mentioned you've got sort of, you still have an involvement with Infleqtion as well as the academic affiliation. And you mentioned the 1600 number for Infleqtion. Is there a similar sort of effort to implement, I guess it's an LDPC is the sort of the family of codes that has been implemented in neutral atoms? Quantum LDPC, I guess?
Not really. My university group's done theory work on that. There's many other theory papers. We do have a preprint out from Infleqtion on logical qubits. It was just 2 logical qubits, but we're actually happy to say that we did some things with those logical qubits that have not been done by other groups.
Yeah.
One, we demonstrated something known as Gottesman benchmarking that really, across a random range of circuit operations, showed that the logical qubits outperformed a physical encoding. And we also ran a prototypical material science simulation problem at the logical level and showed that it outperformed the same circuit done at the physical level by a good margin. So
That's cool.
These were error detecting logical qubits, so this is post-selected.
Okay.
And that's valuable if your problem's not too large.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So as opposed to a sort of mid-circuit measurement and feed forward, you're post-selecting and saying, okay, there was an error in that run, so we're throwing out that.
Post-selecting. And then, of course, we're also working on mid-circuit measurements and what will be error correction and feed forward. And our approach to that is based on a 2-species neutral atom quantum computer, where we combine 2 different elements and use one for data qubits, one for measurement qubits. And what's great about that is because these different elements respond to different wavelengths of light.
Right.
So we do need more lasers.
Yes.
But they respond to different wavelengths, so we can operate on one without crosstalk to the other.
Right.
This is I think will be very significant for increasing the speed of the logical computations.
That's really interesting. Have you created those sort of multi-species traps
We do.
or arrays in the lab, in the university lab?
So we have done it at Infleqtion.
Yeah.
I also have a parallel effort at the university. And also there's a preprint out from December on that work, actually, which was a university Infleqtion collaboration.
Cool.
And we have some very recent unpublished results with higher fidelity 2-species gates.
Excellent. That's really interesting. The sort of the 1 foot in both worlds, the industry and academic. That's, I think, it's a very powerful sort of position or stance to be in at this stage of the technology, because it is so tied to fundamental understanding of quantum phenomena. Do you feel like your university group is more curiosity driven, sort of wider dispersion of sort of experimental designs and the outcomes you're looking for, and then in Infleqtion there's sort of a tighter focus towards engineering kind of solutions?
That's one way to put it. I'd say the boundary or the separation between what we're doing at the university and the company is pretty fuzzy these days. We have some shared overall goals. We want to see the science and the technology advance and quantum computing become a real useful thing. The company wants to provide shareholder value. The university, we're educating people, and publishing is more the goal. But there's certain engineering parts of the work that are best done at the company. And at the university, we can be more exploratory, more flexible. It's sort of less planned in advance. But there's creativity happening both places. And over the last year, since I got involved, we've built up a super capable group at the company. And good ideas go back and forth in both directions. And I'll say that's maybe the thing I'm most proud of, is having established a collaboration between those two entities where it really is a collaboration.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, if if properly harnessed, that kind of sharing of ideas and cross-pollination could be extremely powerful, I think.
That's right.
That's terrific. And actually, along the same lines, do you think that, each modality, again, sort of has its own strengths and weaknesses, its own gating factors? Do you think that there will be sort of ways in which other modalities can be paired with neutral atoms for in larger system design, let's say?
Yeah, so that sort of falls under the rubric of hybrid quantum systems, if you will. And on the university side, I'm part of one of the NSF quantum centers,
right,
which is specifically targeting hybrid quantum architectures
HCAN,
and networks.
I believe,
HCAN,
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm the co-PI on HCAN
Right.
for Madison. And, homogeneous quantum systems are challenging. Hybrid quantum systems are maybe even more challenging if
Sure.
it's possible, but also
Why not
potentially
tackle that too?
really important.
Yeah.
And so we're working on that. And, in a sense, I would say atoms are unique in that they can address the challenges of all the verticals one mentions when talking about quantum technologies, which is computing, communication, and sensing.
Right.
We'll talk about these three areas.
Right.
And I think atoms and ions are sort of the one modality that really has something to say about all of those. In a
that's
meaningful
interesting.
way.
That's interesting.
And we're interested in all of those at Infleqtion, which is not a pure play quantum computing company. We also have an atomic clock product.
Right.
And we're working on atom-based sensors using the same Rydberg states that we use for the quantum computer.
Right.
So there's a huge synergy there and shared knowledge base.
That's really cool. And I mean, I imagine, sensing, processing the signal out of quantum sensing seems like a natural task for quantum computation. And if you're doing both of those things in Rydberg arrays, you maybe even can do it in one device potentially.
Well, that's right. And that has been quantum enhanced learning based on quantum data that's coming from a quantum sensor has been identified as one of the areas where we might potentially first see real useful quantum advantage.
Yeah.
And that's something that's top of mind for us at Infleqtion.
The fact that you're using lasers for cooling and gate operations, does that give you some advantage in optical links between arrays?
Well, yes, from the perspective that intermediate and long distance quantum links are going to be with photons as the information carrier, and we naturally use photons to control our atoms. So making those links is very natural for us, and we're also working on those things.
Yeah. I imagine. I mean, at least in my intuition is that since lasers are an intrinsic part of your system operation, then optical links should be easier between arrays. And although I guess, as you said, there's the upper limit of what you can put in one vacuum is still really high. So maybe you don't need to worry about optical links yet.
It is very high, but nonetheless, people are very much thinking about how to modularize and build larger systems. And it is certainly true that to make optical links between atoms and ions, or atoms with atoms and ions with ions, or vice versa, is much more straightforward than, say, connecting superconducting processors at long distance with optics.
Yeah.
People are working on that, but that's very challenging.
Yeah. So if you look ahead over the next year or so, I know nobody likes to do this, but I guess what's the area that you are the most excited about in terms of areas of progress in neutral atoms today?
Well, I think there's going to be continued progress on the gate fidelity.
Yeah.
It's already very good and competitive, but I think it needs to be even better to really scale up these systems to reduce the overheads of error correction.
Right.
And I'd say one thing that hasn't really been demonstrated yet and needs to be done for neutral atom platform is the ability to do repeated rounds of error correction. Because one of these annoying features of neutral atoms is that when we measure them, they can also heat up motionally.
I see.
And so we need to either not be able to measure them without heating them, or be able to reduce that, recool them without affecting the rest of the array and
I
so
see.
on. And so that really hasn't been done. We haven't done 10 rounds of error correction on neutral
Interesting.
qubits. So that's one of the challenges that people are.
It's almost an equivalent of like a reset gate in a sense.
Well, you make a measurement, it's a projected measurement, you want to reset the spin state.
Right.
And we can do that, no problem. But with atoms, we also have to take care of resetting the emotional state
I see.
at some point.
Fascinating. That's amazing. Thank you very much, Mark. This has been very, very informative and enjoyable.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast, a production of the New Quantum Era, hosted by me, Sebastian Hassinger, with theme music by OCH. You can find past episodes on www.newquantumera.com or on Blue Sky at newquantumera.com. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and tell your quantum curious friends to give it a listen.